What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Thursday, March 30th, 2017. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And a quick little program reminder, the Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 of tomorrow's show. Saturday, of course, is April 1st, or April Fool's Day, although personally I think the real April Fool's Day is April 15th, but that's another matter entirely. So please be on guard for hoax stories. They're already starting to float all around the place. Be very, very careful before you post something somewhere that you know it's a real story and not somebody's idea of a giggle, as it were. Now, we are continuing to see the repercussions coming out of this video that came from MSNBC, in which a former Obama official admits they spied on Trump. Now, this is Evelyn Farkas. She was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense under Obama, saying that, yes, Obama was collecting intelligence on the Trump team. And there's a couple of interesting things there. Now, she's out there saying it's in the context of we're investigating Russia, investigating Russia, investigating Russia. We now know that whole Russia thing is a lot of nonsense because their entire case for Russian interference in the election rested on CrowdStrike, and CrowdStrike has now self-destructed their own credibility. And remember, that second FISA warrant was based on a hoax website. Somebody set up a website to look like it belonged to the Trump campaign, and it did not. So it's all based on lies, fraud, and deception. So there's still time to justify the spying in terms of the Russian investigation. But here's what's really interesting, okay? Evelyn Farkas resigned in 2015, so how is it she's getting access to Trump-Russian intelligence following the election, leading up to the inauguration? That's the hole in this story. And if Evelyn Farkas was getting access to Trump intelligence in 2015, it means it was, in fact, political. It is a new Watergate. They're just trying to blame it on Russia like they're blaming everything else on Russia. There's a big, big stink there, and it's rather... well, I'm not going to use the word amusing. If it wasn't so important, it would be amusing to see the entire establishment, all of Congress and the corporate media just standing there saying, we don't see it and we don't hear it and you can't make us nya, 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 nya. But it's definitely there. Now, the U.S. Senate's probe of Russia's alleged interference in 2016 is going to conclude soon, and their committee leadership is very much on board with this whole Russia did it, Russia's evil. And this is from the Senate Intelligence Committee under the control of Senator Richard Burr and Senator Mark Warner, both of whom are fully on board of this thing about, oh, Russia's interfering with the election, Russia interfered with our election, how dare they? It's okay for the United States to interfere with elections around the world because we're the United States, but how dare Russia do it to us? And their entire story breaks down very quickly on just one point. The claim is being put out that Russia was interfering with the U.S. election to benefit Donald Trump, and yet every single case of election fraud that has been uncovered and investigated benefited Hillary Clinton. So the story just does not work out. They have not found any election fraud that benefited Donald Trump. It all went to benefit Hillary Clinton. The illegal immigrant voters, the dead voters, places where there were more votes than registered voters, all that stuff, all of it favored Hillary Clinton. She was trying to steal the election. She just didn't steal it enough, and that's why she's throwing tantrums. Now, Dick Cheney, Hillary Clinton, all the leftists are uniting to continue to push this Russian hacking narrative and provoke a new Cold War and get us all hot and bothered about Russia. So we're not paying attention to the considerable body of evidence of corruption in our establishment here. Don't look at our corruption. Look at Russia. Russia's the bad. They're bad. We're good. They're bad. Go hate them. Hate them. And so you can almost smell the panic, because they understand the American people are now awake starting to do their own due diligence and finding out what's really going on. They've lost control of the minds of America. They had this wonderful tyrant's paradise where the government would tell the media what to tell the people to believe, and the corporate media would tell us what to believe, and poor, naive, innocent, trusting souls that we were, we believed it. And we got used. But you know the old saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So we're seeing all these articles come up all over the world on how this CrowdStrike has self-destructed because they claimed that they had proof Russia was hacking the Ukraine military computers, and that was the reason Ukraine suffered a major defeat in their battle against the Eastern Ukrainian republics. And then other cyber experts weighed on in and said CrowdStrike's methodology doesn't work. They're guessing. They're just making stuff up to come to this conclusion. And CrowdStrike was forced to back off and say, yeah, we made a mistake there, and we're retracting all the allegations about Russia and Ukraine. But when they had first come on out saying they had proof Russia had hacked the DNC computers, they made a point of saying, we're using the same technology that we used to prove Russia was hacking the Ukraine military. Well, obviously, if it's the same technology and it's been discredited in Ukraine, it's discredited here. And yet our liberal establishment, the corporate media, are still treating this Russia hacking story as if it's beyond question at this point. Don't trouble us with the facts, logic, and law. We know Russia's the bad guy, and if you're a loyal American, you will believe Russia's the bad guy, and you will throw your babies onto their bayonets when we tell you. Not bloody likely on that one. We're going to do a quick shout-out to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And, of course, we're starting to see more and more of the independent media go on back and say, okay, we know that all this Trump, Russia, Russia, Trump, Putin, all this stuff has no factual evidence behind any of it. Let's start looking at those things that we do have evidence for. The abuses of the Clinton Foundation. The email server. Remember, Judicial Watch has just released a bunch of the emails found on Anthony Weiner's sexting laptop, which included classified information sent through non-secure channels and included emails that had not been turned over to Congress. Remember when Hillary Clinton said, we've turned over all the work-related emails? Wrong. She didn't. They found more of them. Where's the congressional investigation into that? Where's the corporate media reporting on that? It's not there. Then you've got the Uranium One deal. There's a huge paper trail about how this joint Russia-Canadian company came on in, wanted to buy up 20% of America's uranium ore, and Hillary Clinton was pushing for this deal, and at the same time, vast amounts of Russian money poured into the Clinton Foundation. They're not looking at that either. In fact, CBS came on out and said there's no credible source that backs up the claim that the Clintons got paid for the Uranium One deal. Because if they talk about the Uranium One deal, then by default, they cannot be credible. That's the thinking there. You're only credible if you are in conformance with the established lies. If you're not going along with a lie, well, then you're not credible. You're a kook. You're a wingnut, tinfoil, hat-wearing conspiracy wacko. It's amazing. You can start to smell the panic out there. Apparently, John Podesta has slapped the Daily Caller with a cease and desist letter regarding the story they ran that Podesta may have violated federal law by not disclosing 75,000 stock shares on his financial disclosure form. And what made this questionable was these 75,000 shares came from a Kremlin-financed company. And when he joined the Obama White House in 2014, he just sort of forgot to mention this. Now, the paper trail is there. Podesta did own this stock. The stock is with this Russian-linked company. And the attitude coming from Podesta and the rest of the establishment is, yes, we're committing crimes, but you're not supposed to know. We worked very hard to get the corporate media not to report to you the crimes that we're doing, and how dare you in the independent media not go along with that? You can almost smell the panic out there where the establishment is now claiming we're all Russian stooges. Remember when the Washington Post listed all these websites, they're arms of Russian propaganda, and we even made a coffee mug to celebrate the accomplishment. And then the Washington Post had to back off the story because their source merely listed all websites that linked to Russia Today, which is hardly any kind of indication we're actually working for the Kremlin. We're just reporting the news. And they're out there now saying, well, you know, they're obviously not patriotic. If they're reporting on the truth, you know, if you're a patriot, you will believe the lies, you will support the lies. See, there's a big problem for the U.S. government. They have gotten by with lying to you, the American people, so long. They don't know any other way to work. They absolutely cannot think of any other way to run the United States government than lies, fraud, and deception. And when the independent media takes away their ability to lie to the public with impunity, they're in trouble. Apparently, it would never occur to them to actually go back and try and run a civil government based on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Where's the fun in that? Where's the profit in that? And again, we're seeing this schism opening up between the liberals and the conservatives, apparently out in the city of Berkeley, not the university, the city of Berkeley, California. The city council got together and voted through a resolution calling for Trump's impeachment, saying that he's undermined freedom of the press and has conspicuous connections with Russian officials. Well, 2 points I want to make. First of all, as president, he's supposed to talk to Russian officials. That's part of the job. It's in the job description. You will meet with the leaders of foreign nations and you will come to some kind of a deal with them or declare war on them, one or the other. Now, as far as undermining freedom of the press, Trump has done no such thing. All he's done is pointed out, as we in the independent media have done, where the corporate media is engaging in lies and deceptions. And I have a hunch that when the Founding Fathers wrote that First Amendment, guaranteeing freedom of the press, it wasn't to give the press a right to lie to the American people, even though there is no law that prohibits that. I'm pretty well convinced that First Amendment is there to protect the truth, not to protect lies. Trump hasn't done anything to undermine freedom of the press. The corporate media is self-destructing because the American people now see the lies. Whether it's Saddam's nuclear weapons, or Assad's sarin gas, or whatever. I mean, it's a huge, huge laundry list of frauds and lies. And the American people are sick of it. Nobody likes to be lied to. Especially on cable TV, where you're being billed monthly for the privilege of being lied to by the corporate media. So it's really getting very, very silly. And I dread the fact that there are probably people within this ultra-liberalist, Trump is not my president cadre, who are willing to start a civil war in the streets of America. And that would be a real disaster. I don't want to see it happen for multiple reasons. I don't want to see ordinary, non-involved people being killed. I don't want to see homes being burned. But more importantly, no nation has ever survived a civil war inside while fighting multiple wars outside. The last guy who tried was Valens. The last emperor of Rome did not work out for him very well. In fact, that's pretty much historians' view. That was the end of the Western Empire. So apparently, in getting on back over to the Senate Intelligence Committee, Chairman Richard Burr and Vice Chairman Mark Warner are now out there saying that there were Russian bots that were interfering with the U.S. election, and the swing state losses are all the fault of these Russian bots that were out there pushing stories that were bad for Hillary Clinton and good for Donald Trump. They didn't need bots. We were all doing it. The American people were sharing information with each other, which is their right under that freedom of speech thing. And what they're trying to do is they're in thrash mode. They understand that that CrowdStrike case has evaporated. So now they're out there just trying to make up anything to keep this meme going, this idea that Russia hacked the election to benefit Donald Trump. Even though, as I mentioned before, every incidence of election fraud that has been uncovered and investigated all favored Hillary Clinton. And that's all you got to keep in mind. So, Brian Fallon, who's currently the National Press Secretary for the I Almost Made It to the White House Hillary Clinton campaign, was doing a speech at Yale University and said that, well, we fail to appreciate the profound impact of the Breitbart effect. It's Breitbart's fault that we lost the election. And it's another reminder, Hillary's people are still in denial. They're looking for a scapegoat for her loss. It's Breitbart. It was the Russians. It was the independent media. The stars were against us. Whatever. Anything to avoid a very simple truth. The American voters just don't like Hillary Clinton. The American voters are well aware of the long history of crime and corruption of the Clintons. They're still in denial. Now then, as I mentioned a little earlier, this is a story that I'm going to ask you to copy off the Judicial Watch website, and we have it linked to whatreallyhappened.com. This needs to be spread everywhere, all over social media. And we're all going to have to do it because I can guarantee you right now, Facebook and Google and all these other corporate media, social media companies, they're going to be trying to filter this and block it as much as they can. Judicial Watch, as I mentioned yesterday, has released nearly 1,200 pages of new State Department records found on Anthony Weiner's sexting laptop. And it includes additional examples of Hillary Clinton sending classified information through unsecured channels. That's a Title 18 felony violation right there. It included State Department emails that had not been turned over to Congress. And it also includes more evidence of donors to the Clinton Foundation getting special favors from Hillary Clinton's State Department. And what are we seeing on the corporate media? Russia, Russia, Russia's the bad guy. Russia's, hate them, pay attention to Russia. Don't pay attention to this other stuff. Pay no attention to that Hillary Clinton behind the curtain. It's Russia, Russia, Russia. And then they wonder why their viewership and readership is in the Al-Qaeda. Remember, a few months ago we reported on how the corporate media websites have been caught using Chinese botnets to artificially inflate the clicks on their website, to make it look like they've got more readers, to make it look like they're still relevant. And of course, they're defrauding their advertisers while doing that. Now, Google is out there starting to tag and censor YouTube videos, claiming that advertisers are starting to yank ads revenues away because they don't like being associated with certain extremist sites. It's blatant censorship. They're trying to say it's based on economics, but I'll tell you what I think is really happening. Google has been caught faking viewership numbers to inflate ad revenues, and maybe the advertisers just got sick of it. And they're starting to say, we don't know that we're getting the bang for our buck from you anymore. We're going to take our money someplace else. Now, Putin has come on out, and he's issued a statement yet again saying all of this talk about Russian interference in the presidential election are lies used for domestic American politics, and that's exactly what it is. And he's out there saying that their polls are showing the majority of the American people aren't buying any of this stuff. The majority of the American people are not buying into this hate Russia nonsense. And it's going to flash back on them. Everything they do only underscores the fact we have a government of the liars, by the liars, and for the liars. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Hello, America. Welcome back to the show here. And interestingly enough, out in California, they were actually looking at a bill to ban fake news, meaning anything not coming out of corporate media. Was an Assembly Bill 1104, the California Political Cyber Fraud Abatement Act. And apparently so many people raised issues about freedom of speech in the First Amendment that it was pulled from consideration at the 11th hour by California Assemblyman Ed Chow. Needless to say, he's a Democrat. So they're afraid. They are absolutely afraid. If they can't lie to you anymore, they have lost all power. Because lying to you is where their power rests. That's basically it. Maintaining that illusion, that matrix, that's how they control you. They don't have enough soldiers and weapons to simply dominate 300 million Americans through fear. Not in a country where 88% of the households have firearms. They can't coerce you, they can't dictate to you, all they can do is swindle you. And that's how the United States government has been operating for the last half century. And now they're losing it, and now they're in a panic, because they don't know any other way to run a government. They've never had any experience running a real government based on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. It's just not in their background. Now, up in New York, apparently somebody started a petition drive demanding First Lady Melania Trump leave New York for Washington, D.C. right now. Now, Melania wants to stay until the end of the school year so that Barron doesn't have to go through switching a school midterm, which can be difficult. And so apparently they got a lot of signatures on this thing, get out of New York. And that kind of weirds me out, more than I can tell you. Because I thought New York City was a sanctuary city where all immigrants are welcome. But apparently not. Not this particular immigrant. You get on out of here. We don't want you here. Continuing in this trend of entertainers thinking that they actually have a clue about politics, apparently Scarlett Johansson, when she was out there talking at this last women's rah-rah thing, came on out and said that she's considering running for political office. I understand George Clooney has got similar ambitions. And yes, we all know that Ronald Reagan was a movie star who became president, but we also, looking back, realized that Ronald Reagan was just a mouthpiece for George Herbert Walker Bush. We've had enough mouthpiece presidents. We need real leaders, like Andrew Jackson, or an Abraham Lincoln, or a Harry Truman. We need statesmen and stateswomen. There's no gender-neutral term for that. Deal with it. Now, as you know, there's a big battle going on over the confirmation of Gorsuch for the Supreme Court. And it's breaking along party lines, and they're not even considering Gorsuch's qualifications. It's all about turf war and gotcha, and we're going to oppose Donald Trump. And the Democrats are dead set against Gorsuch being confirmed for the Supreme Court, which is weird because back when he was up for a federal judgeship, not a single Democrat voted against him. So they don't have a problem with his politics. They have a problem with the fact that he's Trump's nominee, and we want to get rid of Trump's nominee. We've got to fight Trump tooth and nail. And it's looking like, despite this, Gorsuch is going to win his confirmation anyway. And now we've got Chucky Schumer is out there saying, well, we need to change the rules here. You know, we should make it that a Supreme Court judge gets at least 60 votes in the Senate. Which is weird because back in 2013, Schumer was saying it should be just a straight up or down vote. In other words, we're going to change the rules until we get the result we want. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, the New York Slimes has come on out with a story. They've identified newness sources within the White House, and here are their names. Ezra Cohen-Watnick, the Senior Director for Intelligence in the National Security Council, and Michael Ellis, a lawyer who works on national security issues at the White House counsel's office and formerly worked on the staff of the House Intelligence Committee. Huzzah, huzzah, we've got the goods. Nunes was talking to White House staff, blah, 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 blah. The New York Times has just committed the exact same offense that George W. Bush did with Valerie Plame, outing people with connections to the intelligence community. And further on down, even this article in the Times acknowledges the reason Nunes went over there to the White House is because he was asked to meet these guys in a secure location in the White House where people can view classified reports. We mentioned this the other day. The classified information are on a separate computer network that does not connect with the outside general internet. So when we found classified information on Hillary Clinton's private email server, it's because somebody put it on a flash drive and walked it over. But I digress. Nunes needed to see some documents, and they said, you have to come over here within our controlled environment and look at the classified materials here, and that's what he did. And the Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee are trying to make a big deal about it. Oh, he's coordinating with Trump, he's colluding, he's obstructing, we've got to get rid of him. And it's just turning into chaos over here. It really is now. Obviously, at this point, the Senate Intelligence Committee is going to come on out and say that even though they don't have any actual evidence of Trump-Russia collusion, that they're pretty much convinced, you know, from the preponderance of suspicions, there's way too much smoke, there must be fire, we just can't find it. The House Intelligence Committee under Nunes is out there saying, we can't find any evidence. And there is where the political aspect of this comes into view. The House Intelligence Committee is saying, we can't find any evidence, and the Senate Intelligence Committee is saying, we don't need any evidence, we want tar and feathers right now. Now, getting on back to the category of people who populate our government, and like I said, there are rare exceptions. Cynthia McKinney, Dr. Ron Paul, Donald Trump himself, a handful of others. Trey Gowdy, obviously. Chavez. They're there because they really think they can make a difference, and good for them. But unfortunately, the vast majority of people in that government are there for the thrill of it all, for the power, and for a fast buck. Now, apparently, a U.S. diplomat, Candace Marie Claiborne, received tens of thousands of dollars in cash and gifts from Chinese intelligence agents. And, you know, they've arrested her, and they're going to charge her with espionage. See, here's the problem, and it shows the double standard. Back in 1994, when Bill Clinton was running for re-election, he was using his authority as president to transfer highly sensitive technology to China. And Chinese money was being funneled into his re-election campaign through Chinese American citizens to make it quasi-legal. But when Congress began to investigate, they found out these Chinese American citizens were getting the money from Asian sources, including Chinese intelligence. That's the same exact crime this lady has just been arrested for. And we still have an open question. Was Hillary Clinton repeating the Chinagate scandal using her private email server with weaker security than Ashley Madison to send the information to foreign interests who then paid her with donations to the Clinton Charitable Foundation? I mean, if you think about it, Charitable Foundation, weak email server, it's a perfect spy system. She doesn't have to go on out and tape documents under a bridge like Hansen did. Doesn't have to physically steal the files the way Pollard did. Doesn't have to walk around drawing X's on mailboxes with a chalk the way Ames had to. It's a perfect automated system. Secrets out, money in. We're going to take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Hey, Mike, did you talk about, I missed the first 6 minutes of your show, about Ezra Cohen Watnick. That's the New York Times are saying that's where Nunes, one of his sources is. We just did that about a couple of minutes ago, and the New York Times is apparently now guilty of unmasking and is a repeat of the Valerie Plame scandal, exposing these people's names
to potential foreign adversaries, because now we know these individuals have security clearances and access to certain information. That automatically makes them a target for blackmail, for honey trapping, for however it's going to be done.
Mike, this is going to be now this is a war between elements of the DIA and the CIA. So you've got a major turf war, which is really dangerous now at this point, because you're going to have elements splitting off into different. It's fractured. We're fractured, Mike.
Yeah, it is. The whole Fed. It's not just the intelligence community. The whole government is fracturing along these party lines and ideological lines. And they're so busy fighting their turf wars and their faction fights and trying to score points and gotchas on each other, they're dysfunctional. They can't function as a real government managing this nation anymore. They're too busy with the infighting. And again, this is something that we saw in the Politburo and the Kremlin in the months leading up to the collapse of the Soviet Union. And to me, it is very obvious that's where this federal government is going. It's going to self-destruct and implode, and we need to be ready. We, the American people, need to be ready to say, this is the new government we're going to have. We're going to start with that Constitution and the Bill of Rights. We don't need the Electoral College, obviously. And we are going to have an ironclad rule, no more private central banks, and there'll be some other adjustments to bring the Constitution and the Bill of Rights up to date. But let's be honest, that revolutionary system Thomas Jefferson created worked. It worked wonderfully until the money junkies and the corrupt started mutating it and tinkering with it to turn it to their own advantage. So we need to erase all of that corrupting influence for the last 200 years and get back to a simple, elegant, constitutional republic with democratically chosen leaders who are elected in absolutely transparent, verifiable elections.
But you notice, sir, one thing that nobody's noticing, well, we're noticing, is they're doing all this. But even for their own constituents, the Democrats, they're not getting anything done.
No, they're not.
They're actually doing this. It's a joke.
It is. The government is paralyzed. I mean, except for the fact that they're continuing to drop bombs all over the place. Nothing is getting done. Every time Trump wants to go on out and try and get something moving, the obstructionists in Congress say, no, we're going to sit still. I want to improve the health care system. No, you can't. We're going to keep Obamacare no matter how bad it is, just because it's Obama and we're opposing Donald Trump. It's a government that is in a state of paralysis.
Hey, Mike, I want to switch over, if I have time, to talk about Putin with the Arctic conference he had. And look, he knows, they know what's going on, because he said they won't let Trump do this. And he also said, like, about the French riots and all this, the Arab Spring. The Russian government, the FSB, they exactly know what's going on. You know, so, I mean, they're way ahead of the game of this regime change and all these, springs and revolutions like Ukraine. They know.
It's easy to know. All you have to do is stop watching the bovine excrement pouring out of the corporate media screens and go out and do your own homework, and you can very quickly get a grasp on what's really going on. And I wish Trump would do that, because I'm still of the opinion that he's basing his decisions as president on a worldview that is still rooted firmly in what corporate media has been feeding him his entire lifetime. And he's got to make that break. He understands how much the corporate media is lying about him now. He's got to take that next step and realize they've been doing it all along.
You just said it. He needs to make the step forward, Mike. For if they take a step forward, he needs not to step back, because they're just going to keep stepping forward. He's got to move 2 steps forward when they move 1 step forward. He cannot step backwards with these people. He's not going to work with these people. Will not work with him.
No, they won't.
Never,
they absolutely won't. And Trump needs to understand he's not in a business environment anymore. He's in politics, and politics is a very, very different beast than the world of business. And he's trying to be businesslike, and that is a big mistake. He's got to be a leader. And again, I'm at a point right now where I have to admit I'm very disappointed in some of what Donald Trump has been doing, especially with regards to the military escalations. But he's still the president, and if he wants to stay the president, he's got to regain the initiative. He's got to do more than just go on out and tweet that it's time for an investigation into the Clintons. He's got to call up Attorney General Sessions and say there is ample cause here for a full independent counsel investigation into the Clinton Foundation, the email server, and the rest of it. Or if nothing else, Let's get Judicial Watch, let's get Freedom Watch, let's get Larry Klayman, and give them the resources they need and the legal authority they need to do the job for us.
And Mike, I want to go back to real quick on Putin with Iran. They're also doing a lot of railroad deals with running electricity lines for the railroads and commodity trading. So they're moving forward. We're stagnating. There's the future, Eurasia.
Yeah, absolutely. They're making deals. The United States wants to make war. The rest of the world is making deals. Peace through commerce. And the reason the United States can't go down that route is because we've allowed our manufacturing to decline for 30 years. We've waived product liability on so many areas of our commerce. Nobody trusts our products anymore. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. Nobody wants our vaccines anymore. And anything that we make is overpriced junk that doesn't work. And that's why we're in this corner here. We've got nothing to hold up the economy other than forcing the world to borrow our Federal Reserve notes for cross-border trade and banking. The rest of the world doesn't want to do that. And that's the reason for all these wars. Conquer the Middle East, oil countries, shackle that oil trade to the U.S. dollar. Conquer Venezuela, shackle their oil to the U.S. dollar. And that's what they're trying. That's what is behind all of these wars, is an argument over whose brand of ink and paper we're going to be using for the next 100 years. This clash of civilization is actually a war between banking systems. And millions, possibly billions, are going to die if this thing gets out of control. So anyway, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We're going to get into the news from the war zones. It's still going crazy over there. There's an article that came out of antiwar.com which sums things up pretty clearly. U.S. wars are escalating across the Middle East with no end in sight. We're still stuck in Iraq. We're still stuck in Afghanistan. We can't make headway in Syria. We can't get into Iran. We're in a quagmire in Libya. We're in a quagmire in Yemen. And still the war hawks are out there saying, let's add a few more onto that list. By golly, there's no such thing as too much war. Yeah, there is. It's called losing. We all know who the aggressor is here. It's the United States and its allies. We know why they're aggressing. They have allowed the economy to become lopsided in favor of the money junkies and the financiers. And they've forgotten that a healthy economy has to have products to sell to other countries, and those other countries have to want to buy those products, not be arm-twisted into it through Trans-Pacific Partnership and Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. That's how the mafia sells the product. If you don't buy the stickers from us to put on your machine, something bad going to happen. It's exactly what it is. It's a protection racket. You will buy our GMO agriculture or bad things will happen to you. Now then, latest word is the Syrian army is regaining ground up in northern Hama, and that's a very, very good thing. Apparently the Syrian army and Hezbollah are fighting the terrorists near the Syria's border with Lebanon. And that is one of those situations where Israel's probably very tempted to send in more warplanes. And I hope reason will prevail, because Syria is now shooting at Israel's warplanes and threatening an outright missile strike into Israel if Israel doesn't mind its own business in this. Now, yesterday we were reporting that some of these formerly U.S.-backed terrorists were accepting Assad's deal, and they were leaving Homs. Well, there's been a clarification on that. About half of them have put down their arms and accepted the amnesty deal, and the other half have not, but the net result is they all still left anyway, and so it looks like Homs is going to be back under Syrian control very, very quickly. Meanwhile, all indications are that the U.S. Is getting ready to partition by force Syria. Just literally carve off a chunk of it for the future Kurdistan. So who's the aggressor here? It's not Assad. It's not Russia. It's the United States. Now, Tillerson is trying to make it look like we're going back to this idea that we're really thinking about what's best for the Syrian people. and came on out and said that the automatic resignation of Bashar al-Assad's presidency is no longer a prerequisite for a way out of the crisis. That has been something the U.S. foreign policy has stayed with all along. Assad must go, Assad must go, Assad must go. We must make way for one of our puppet rulers. And Tillerson is now saying that Assad's long-term fate will be decided by the Syrian people, meaning they're going to rig that election. Now, as you know, there is a big hue and cry over the massive amount of civilian casualties from U.S. airstrikes down in Iraq. And the attitude we are now getting from the military leadership is, yeah, and you may as well get used to it. And so apparently comments from General Joseph Votel are moving beyond the issue about whether civilian casualties are right or wrong, and he's just saying there's going to be a lot more of them, and you might as well just get used to that idea. Now, Turkish Prime Minister Binali Yildirim made an announcement today declaring that Operation Euphrates Shield, which is the name for Turkey's invasion of Syria, has come to an end. Well, not exactly. They've just given it a new name. But Turkey is still trying to invade Syria. It's amazing. It is amazing. We really do live in that media-dominated generation where they think they can change the name of something and will forget what it was before. And no, we don't. We don't do that anymore. All right, we're coming up here on another commercial break. We'll be right back after these few words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I'm sure you all remember ISIS. This was this media presentation that came out of these known Israeli propaganda sites like Site Intelligence and the rest of it. And there was this big theater presentation to remind us how horrible these people are. You know, ISIS was beheading people, and some of those videos and photos turned out to be fake. Then they really went and burned up a guy to show how desperate they were. ISIS is dropping kittens into blenders. ISIS is tearing the tags off your couch cushions, all this other stuff. Be afraid of ISIS, be afraid of ISIS, booga, booga, booga. And then it kind of faded off and went away. All of a sudden, we're starting to see a ramp up again of these media presentations about how evil ISIS is and how we have to be afraid of them. And two that sort of stick in my mind, apparently down in the Sinai, ISIS has beheaded 2 men for sorcery, which is intended to make ISIS look like a bunch of kooks along with being dangerous fanatics. And this one that just came on out where apparently ISIS has killed an infant to punish the father for wanting to leave. And this feels like a restart of the propaganda campaign. ISIS is bad. ISIS is really bad. Be sure and look in the closet for ISIS. Look under the bed. ISIS coming to get you. And so I think we can expect to see some kind of a false flag involving ISIS to try and escalate the war effort again. But as I said before, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. We've been lied to so many times. How can you even expect that we're going to believe anything that you guys tell us anymore here? Now, we have here a story, again from Breitbart, and apparently we're now starting to hear from the Pentagon that Iran's heightened threat since the nuclear deal may require military action. In other words, even though Iran signed the P5+1 deal, even though Iran has fully complied with the P5+1 deal, the agenda to invade and conquer Iran is still on the table. They're just looking for an excuse. Remember that story we had yesterday? ISIS is after Iran because Iran tolerates the Jews, which doesn't even really make any sense. I swear they're making up this propaganda with a dartboard. So Iran is not a nuclear threat. They're trying to basically spin that Iran's building of military defenses represents a threat to the world. Now, little pop quiz. How long has it been since Iran initiated a war of conquest against another country? Take your time and think about it. It's been over 200 years. And certainly not since the 1979 Iranian Revolution. It's not in their nature. They want to just sit on their own country, take care of their own country, do business, and be left alone. That's it. But it looks like the war on Iran is back on the table. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are still open, 800-313-9443. We're talking about the war zones, all the wars going all over. Russia has just asked a very reasonable question in my mind. It's saying, if the United States is the world's conscience, as it likes to portray itself as, why doesn't it see what's happening in Yemen? And that is a very good question. The United States has, for decades, portrayed itself as the leader of the free world, the champion for human rights. And Moscow's called them on it, calling their bluff. If you are, as you claim to be, the world's conscience, why are you not seeing what's going on in Yemen? And of course, the same question could be applied equally to the civilian deaths we're seeing in Syria and Iraq, that are treated as, well, you know, cost of war, and there's going to be more of them, but oh, please feel just horrible trauma for all those poor people killed up there in Westminster, near Parliament. The hypocrisy is staggering. In fact, if hypocrisy were an Olympic sport, the United States would have swept the gold. Now, Israel is throwing yet another tantrum. Netanyahu is over here with the AIPAC conference, and he got up there and he said, Israel is going to cut back their contribution to the United Nations by another $2 million in protest at all the resolutions that the UN has passed against Israel, which are obviously rooted in hatred of Jews and anti-Semitism. I think it's specifically aimed at that report that came on out recently said Israel's an apartheid state, which nobody can really deny. But Israel twisted the arm of the U.S. government, and the U.S. government twisted the arm of the United Nations. The United Nations retracted the report. The author of the report has now resigned in protest and is out there on a speaking tour saying, yes, Israel is an apartheid state. And so now Israel is saying, well, we're going to punish the United Nations for even having posted that report in the first place by pulling back $2 million. If you're out of money, go get it from the Americans. I think if I were the United Nations, I would respond to this obvious attempt at extortion by republishing that report and just say, we've had it with Israel's tantrums. Israel should not be in the United Nations anyway, because Israel's membership at the UN had 2 conditions placed on it. In fact, Israel is the only nation that's a member of the United Nations that had conditions on their membership. Condition number 1, Palestinian right of return. Condition number 2, if the Palestinians chose not to return to their homes and villages taken during the creation of Israel, Israel would financially compensate them for those properties. Israel hasn't complied with either one of those. I'd like to see the United Nations man up, as it were, or person up for all you liberals. Grow a spine. That's gender neutral. Grow a spine. And kick Israel out. Now then, you know, the other day, there was a story that came on out. We had a while back all of these bomb threats against Jewish centers around the world, and oh, it's the rise of anti-Semitism, and the corporate media was just out there saying, oh, Jew hatred has just never been this high before, it's the rise of the Nazis, and we've got to do something. And Trump said, you know, this could be a hoax, and the media excoriated them, and then it turned out it was a Jewish teenager making all these bomb threats, and they arrested him. And you'd think they'd want to throw this guy in the Huskow for making the fake bomb threats, using up civil resources, dealing with the bomb threats, and if nothing else, embarrassing the heck out of both Israel and the corporate media. But no, we're already seeing in the corporate media how we should feel sorry for this poor kid. It turns out he has autism, and he's got a tumor. He didn't know what he was doing when he was making all these bomb threats. Really, we should all feel sorry for him and let him go. We shouldn't even dream of putting him in prison, because only a filthy Jew-hating anti-Semite who wants Hitler to come back and gas Jewish babies in the ovens would want this poor guy, a victim of his autism and tumor, locked up for making all those bomb threats that the corporate media use to scream that anti-Semitism is on the rise. Right. I'm starting to wonder, are there any of these hate crimes that are not hoaxes? Because this is nothing new. It's been going on all along. In fact, we posted a flashback article to 1963 when 5 Jews were arrested for painting swastikas on the Israel consulate in New York. So they could come on out and say, oh, Nazis, Nazis, Nazis. I want to share an insight with you. Israel's out there trying to say the Nazis are going to come back and kill us. No, they aren't. Everybody who's running around just like a Nazi is usually being paid to do that. In fact, there was a big stink back in the 1930s. There was an American Nazi party that was out there, and of course, various Jewish organizations were saying, we need your donations. We've got to defend our people against these horrible Nazis. And it turned out the head of this American Nazi party, which had a total membership of like 6, but they got a lot of press, he was charged with embezzling from his employer. And his employer turned out to be the Anti-Defamation League. It's all hoaxes. It's all illusion. Now, here's a story that raises some concerns. This is from Mondo Weiss. Palestinian-American teacher brutally attacked by the Jewish Defense League outside the AIPAC conference. This is a 55-year-old guy, and he's an instructor at a community college in North Carolina, and he was up there in front of the AIPAC conference, and he was attacked and brutally beaten by members of the Jewish Defense League. And apparently they knocked him down, punched and kicked him, hit him in the face with metal poles, and just tore him up. You should see the picture. It's kind of ugly. Now, I have a question. The Jewish Defense League was declared a terrorist group back in 1986. They were caught trying to assassinate Congressman Darrell Issa in 2001. FBI statistics show that between 1980 and 1985, there were 18 terrorist attacks attributed to Jews, 15 of those by members of the JDL. Why are they still at large? We keep hearing about a war on terror. There's a terrorist group out there in the open. Why are they untouchable? So, anyway, I remember the JDL, at about the same time they were doing Darrell Issa, they had a plot to blow up a mosque, which was thwarted. And they arrested the JDL's leader at the time, Irv Rubin, who apparently was going to roll over and make a deal with prosecutors. And then all of a sudden he got really depressed and committed suicide in prison. Let's talk about the economic news now. The pound is getting a little bit of a roller coaster ride, a little bit of turmoil, following Theresa May invoking Article 50. And a lot of it is a tremendous amount of uncertainty as to what's going on, because you have Donald Trump is fast-tracking a trade deal with Great Britain. You have the EU now threatening to veto the Brexit if Great Britain makes any trade deals with any country before the Brexit is finalized 2 years from now. This is another one of the EU's underhanded tricks to try and derail Brexit by literally saying Great Britain cannot trade with any other country until the process is over. No trade deals anywhere. So they're still trying to find a way to unwind this here. Now, gold buying is soaring over in Great Britain. British demand for investment gold bars has surged 39% as a means to preserve their wealth against an uncertain pound sterling. We're not seeing that demand reflected in the price of gold for some strange, mysterious reason, but it's definitely there. Now, as we reported last week, actually earlier this week, Rand Paul's Audit the Fed bill passed the House committee. Now, this was originally written by his father, Ron Paul, and a lot of people are shouting their approval, and they're asking, what does it mean for the Federal Reserve? Well, I hate to sound like a pessimist, but I would be very surprised if this bill actually got voted through Congress, because the Federal Reserve and Wall Street are very generous supporters of political campaigns. And that's why they always get what they want. Everyone always talks about getting rid of the Federal Reserve. The reality is Congress can revoke the charter of the Federal Reserve anytime they want to. And we know the last time they got close to auditing the Federal Reserve literally was hinting that any attempt to fully audit their books and to expose to the American people just how much wealth has been taken out of their pockets by this little trick of creating the public currency out of thin air and loaning it into circulation at interest. How much real wealth has been taken out of the pockets of the American people whose labor produces that wealth and put into the pockets of the bankers, all for the cost of ink, paper, and some computers. You would be shocked. You would absolutely be shocked. And the Federal Reserve doesn't want you to know that. And that's why they're fighting this thing tooth and nail. And the last time they came close to an audit, they said, if you dare audit us all, we can't guarantee the stability of the financial system. And that's always a very credible threat. Remember back when the Wall Street bankers tried to organize a fascist coup against Franklin Roosevelt, and they recruited Marine Corps Major General Smedley Butler to lead the military aspect of it. And Butler pretended to go along until he had all the evidence, and then he revealed it to Roosevelt, and Congress classified it. Oh, we can't upset the bankers. And Roosevelt was unable to do anything about it because the bankers all just said, you arrest any one of us, we'll crash your New Deal economy, and we'll make sure that you are blamed for it. And Roosevelt wasn't able to get back at them until World War II actually broke out, at which point he started nailing all these people under the Trading with the Enemies Act. Because they were doing business with the Nazis. Brown Brothers Harriman, a good example. They helped finance the Nazis' rise to power. Those who control the money supply really are in control of the country, and that is why Congress almost qualifies as having committed treason when they delegated the money creation authority vested in Congress by the Constitution to a third party, which, by the way, is not in the Constitution. The Constitution does not allow the Congress to delegate money creation to an outside party. It's not specifically enumerated, to use the constitutional term. So I would like to see it happen. I mean, if it goes through Congress and Trump signs it, for all we know, all the main Federal Reserve banks would be burned to the ground by evil ISIS. We're sorry, the paper records are gone here, and we just don't know where it all went, and you'll just take our word for it. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. That happened during the Oklahoma bombing. Remember Waco? David Koresh and his people were out there just minding their own business. They had a church commune, and David Koresh, contrary to the propaganda, Koresh was actually doing a good job because his predecessor had been doing some very nasty things in that church compound, including running a meth lab. And when Koresh finally took over, he called up the local police and he said, my predecessor had a meth lab here, please come take it away. And they came and they took it away. Koresh was friends with the local police. They used to go out target shooting together. And one of the reasons they were doing all of that is the way this church community funded itself, remember this is Texas, they would buy and sell and repair used guns. And by the way, that's the reason why when the BATF showed up at the Branch Davidian compound, nobody was shooting back at them, because all the working guns were out at a gun show. If you look at the photos of the armory in the Branch Davidian church after it was all over, you can see all the guns still stacked neatly against the wall, covered in ash. They hadn't been moved. They hadn't been touched. Everybody knew they weren't going to work. So Congress, following the public outcry of Waco, said we're going to have an investigation of the BATF, who appeared to have staged this attack on the Branch Davidians for no other reason than to generate positive publicity, following a string of PR nightmares of kicking down the wrong door and killing the innocent people, to the point where Congress was thinking about yanking the enforcement charter from the BATF and cutting their budget. So they needed a victory. We'll go get those wacko church gun people. And it blew up in their face. The FBI had to clean up the mess. Congress was forced to have an investigation. And the FBI and the BATF collected all of the paperwork from Waco, Texas, and for some reason stored it in the federal building in Oklahoma City, the Murrah Federal Building. And it was all in there, just about ready to go up to Congress, when a domestic terrorist, Timothy McVeigh, blew up the federal building with a truckload of ANFO, so they claim. Well, golly gee whiz, the paper trail is gone. Can't have an investigation now. We're really sorry. That's how these things get done here. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog, the core of the problem in America, the private Federal Reserve Bank. Yes. Private central banks do not exist for the benefit of the nation and the people. They exist to serve themselves and their owners. And they have been playing this game on the human race going back 300 years. And all it takes is ink, paper, these days computers, and enough politicians willing to sell out their country, which is almost all of them. Jim Rogers is out there saying the Federal Reserve is going to be the ruin of us all. And he's absolutely correct about that, because the Federal Reserve isn't interested in the welfare of the nation and its people as a whole, only in the maximization of its profit. Look at how the central banks over in Europe are just bleeding Greece and Cyprus absolutely dry, or Venezuela. They're driving these countries into mass starvation, famine, and collapse just so they have another little coin to rub between their greasy little fingers. Doug Nolan is out there saying central bank credit risks are reaching new highs. Everybody is overextended. And here is where we see the pyramid is starting to crumble a little bit higher. And by that I mean, when you have a pyramid, it starts to fracture at the bottom. Wages and salaries fall off, consumer borrowing falls off, and then the cracks start to move up higher. Because now corporate borrowing has ground to a halt. In other words, nobody is trying to start a new business. Commercial and industrial companies are not borrowing any money. They're not starting a new business because they know the customers aren't going to be there. Because everybody below them on that economic period has been bled dry. Down in New Zealand, they're starting to get a little more tyrannical there. Apparently, New Zealand banks are now being ordered to provide police with customer details on every cash transaction over $10,000. They want to know where the money is. They want to know where it's going. And they're justifying it as the war on drugs, the war on terror. And what they really want to know is where the wealth is when the collapse comes and they have to start confiscating it. All right, we're coming up here on a commercial break. When we come on back, more about the economy, more about the wars, science, health, all that other stuff. We'll be right back. And Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're going to take some phone calls, starting with Alex in Florida. Alex, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I want to give Trump a pass, but it's hard when I continue to watch him on YouTube in the past make statements about things. Like the other day, I heard an interview where the gentleman on the interview asked him, what about Bill Clinton? And this was in 2015. He said, Bill Clinton, it's not going to be good for him because of Epstein Island, which I couldn't believe that I heard Trump say that. So I think he's aware of the mass corruption that's going on. He's on video saying that he thinks there were bombs in the Twin Towers.
Yeah, I understand, and that's probably one of the reasons why so many people are afraid of him, because he's willing to go into those dark areas that everybody has agreed have to be hidden from the American people.
Yeah, I just don't know. I mean, he has kids, and when you have kids, it's like all they have to do is say, hey, you know, we'll kill your kids and your family and your wife, and you your points your vision kind of changes, or your agenda could change.
I imagine it would, but there's another possibility, and that is, you know, we know that the CIA basically tries to establish relations with anybody who's successful, and if you refuse to establish relations, they go to great lengths to make you unsuccessful as quickly as possible. I learned that one the hard way at CBS Television City. And it may be that Trump has had a relationship with the CIA all along and is going along with the war agenda. But at this point, I have to say that, yes, I am disappointed in Donald Trump. I still think he's a heck of a lot better than Hillary Clinton ever would have been. But I'm definitely disappointed in Trump's military escalations. I'm very disappointed that he seems to be backpedaling on the vaccine issue, although Robert Kennedy Jr. is definitely out there making some noise. But I think a big part of the problem is that Trump right now is totally on the defensive. Everybody is out there throwing mud balls at him, and he's playing defense, and he's got to stop doing that. If Trump allows his opponents in politics to continue to direct the battle, he's going to lose. He's playing the fight. He's basically fighting the war the way the enemy wants him to fight it, and that's always a recipe for disaster.
And another thing, you know that I was a Bernie Sanders supporter, or well, I'll let you know that I was a heavy Bernie Sanders supporter, and part of the reason that I got and left the Democratic Party is because I could tell that the press during the primaries, it was rigged. They kept on asking him to drop out of the race, and you could just tell they weren't giving him nowhere near fair time on his campaign, and that's when I realized that I hate the Democratic Party, and I'm leaving, and I left the Democratic Party, and now today, when I see the FBI and Congress at these hearings, they're the same. I can tell that it's rigged.
Yeah, it is. It's rigged. What they're trying to conceal from the American people is the fact that we have a government that from top to bottom, with precious few exceptions, is steeped in CIA drug money corruption, going all the way back to the 1980s. And everybody's dirty. Remember, before the Clintons shut that foundation down, there was an anonymous FBI source that was posting to the web. All of the major players in Washington, D.C. were dipping into that foundation, using it as a tax shelter, using it as a slush fund. That was the Clinton money machine. It was sort of a larger version of the Arkansas Development Finance Authority. And again, even the Clintons' worst enemies are working to protect this secret out of a desire to keep their own jobs. Because if the true scale of everything that's been going on came on out, it would instantly delegitimize the U.S. government in the eyes of the American people. And more American people are starting to say, this government doesn't represent me. It's clearly a government of the oligarchs. It's clearly a corrupted mess. And people are starting to say a new government might not be a bad idea as long as we get to pick it as opposed to the United Nations. Alex, going to let you go.
Yeah,
Going to take a break for commercials. Back with more calls after these few words. Aloha America, welcome back to the show. We got a bunch of callers waiting on the line, but before we get to that, breaking story here. The White House Deputy Chief of Staff, Katie Walsh, has been removed from her position. She was Reince Priebus's number 2 person, apparently a very close friend, and has been reassigned to a pro-Trump group that is outside the White House itself. A little bit of a staffing shakeup, and everybody was wondering what was going on. Well, it's just come on out. Apparently this Katie Walsh, up until today, the White House Deputy Chief of Staff has been identified as the source of the leaks coming from inside the Trump administration to the New York Slimes and the Washington Compost. So they found the leaker, and they're dealing with her gently. She still has a job. But apparently everybody inside the White House knew that anything you said to her was going to wind up on the pages of the corporate media. And by the way, she was a never-Trump Republican, so I don't know why she was brought onto the staff to begin with. Again, something else I do not agree with Donald Trump. He's trying to be magnanimous in victory. Trump needs to scrape out the White House and the executive office building of all the Obama holdovers, of all the never-Trump Republicans. He really needs to build his administration from people who come from outside that political swamp, or he's never going to get anything done. And I have a little revelation for Donald Trump or for whoever is monitoring this show on his behalf. There are people who are very qualified to do the work outside the political circle. There's no guarantee that somebody who's inside the political realm is any smarter than anybody else. Look at Chelsea Clinton in her comment about global warming causing diabetes. Or look at anything said recently by Maxine Waters, Dianne Feinstein, or Nancy Pelosi. That was the third name I was looking for. All right, let's take some more phone calls. Yvonne in Berkeley, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, comrade.
Aloha.
I wanted to talk to you about... Can you hear me?
I hear you just fine.
You able to hear me?
I hear you.
Okay, great. Great, comrade. I am calling from the Democratic People's Republic of California. And I wanted to do a shout-out for April 15th at the MLK Park in Berkeley. It's the Freedom of Speech rally that the base stickman will be there, 12 o'clock, high noon. We want to stand up for our rights to have our freedom of speech, regardless if we're for Trump, against Trump, or neutral. So we want to protect our American comrades in Berkeley.
Okay, give us the time.
And I am on the Trump side.
Give us the time, date, and venue one more time.
Okay, it is April 15th at the Martin Luther King Park in Berkeley, California, at 12 o'clock, high noon.
Okay, I hope there's a really good turnout, and if there is, please send me pictures, and I'll post them here at whatreallyhappened.com.
Yeah, I sure will. I sure will.
All right.
And I wanted to add one more thing. I wanted to give a shout-out for AB 757 here in California, and that's to change the concealed weapon laws, or to give people concealed weapon permits. The wording is may give concealed weapons permit. And we're trying to change that to shall be given a concealed weapons permit.
Okay.
So support AB 757. Call your congresspeople, your representatives, and let them know that they need to step up and change these gun.
Good luck getting that done in California, especially with Pelosi and Feinstein and everything. All right, thank you very much for the information. We're going to let you go and switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Like, I wanted to talk to you about Teresh at first, but, you know, you brought up the thing about Trump now. What I think the problem is he thinks he's running a business.
Yes.
He wants people from different perspectives to come in, including these Goldman Sachs thugs and thieves, including people, like you said, never Trumpers, and even some Democrats like this guy, another Goldman Sachser, I think his name Gary Cohn. He thinks these people are going to be loyal to him because he's running a business. He's not running a business. You got to understand, if he keeps this up, this administration is going to go down in flames.
I agree.
No ifs, ands, or buts.
He's
also got to get rid of these generals. He's over enamored by these generals. What's his name? Mattis is basically a globalist.
Yes.
The other guy is even more of a globalist, belongs to CFR, the McMasters. And I don't know why for Homeland Security didn't hire Sheriff Clark of Milwaukee. And as a matter of fact, you should get rid of Comey right now and get Clark in here as FBI director. These are people who, just a guy who would be loyal to him.
I'm absolutely in agreement with you. I'm absolutely in agreement. You know, Donald Trump spent his life in business, and he thinks the White House is just another business venture. And he comes from a world where if you hire somebody and you're giving them a paycheck, their first loyalty is going to be with you. That's not how Washington, D.C. works, and he needs to wake up and realize it. Now, I'm glad that they hunted down this leak, and they have transferred her out. But you know, Trump really needs to just grit his teeth. He knows the corporate media is going to excoriate him for it. In fact, the corporate media is out there saying, oh, this staff shakeup is proof that his administration is weak and crumbling. No, he was getting rid of a leaker, is what he was doing. But Trump's got to regain the initiative. If he keeps on playing defense, he's going to lose. Because when you're playing defense, you're fighting the fight the way the enemy wants you to fight, and you're already in trouble. You've got to regain the initiative, break out of the box. Got to show some leadership. Not business sense, leadership is what is needed now.
Alex Jones seems to think that it's NATO acting on their own, putting more troops on the borders of Russia and all that. I don't
could very well be.
I think Trump should stop.
No,
I think Trump.
No, I have to agree with Alex Jones on that one, that it could very well be NATO just acting on its own, because NATO understands the more they hype this Russian aggression, the more money and toys they get to play with. Because when you have, and again, this goes all the way back to Eisenhower, when you have this military-industrial complex, they hate times of peace. And they will work to start a war if for no other reason than to get more money, more promotions, more toys to play with. They are a power unto themselves. And just like we have a military-industrial complex here in the United States, which is very often acting contrary to the good of the nation and the will of the civilian leadership, NATO over in Europe, I would agree with Alex Jones on this one, that yes, NATO is probably doing this pretty much on their own, figuring it's easier to get forgiveness than permission. But right now they've got Donald Trump so busy, defending himself from all the slime coming out of the swamp, that he really cannot act decisively on any of this stuff. They've got him paralyzed with all this nonsense.
Well, he's got to act decisively. All he has to do is give an order, get out, get American troops to leave. You want to put other NATO troops someday, that's up to you. We're getting American troops out of there right now, this minute. End of story. You don't like it, tough. Because this is the EU basically trying to keep itself together. It's also not only the military-industrial complex, it's that EU that's desperately.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The European Union needs a Russian monster to scare all the member states into staying connected to Brussels.
Meanwhile, the EU is really our enemy, while Russia is not our enemy.
Yes.
You heard what this guy Gunker or Hunker, whatever he said today, that he, huh?
Yeah, we were going to talk about what he said a little bit further in the show, and he's definitely off his rocker. Or I mean, we've seen so many videos of him obviously drunk in public. There's a man with a definite.
I just want to remind him about the Zimmerman letter. Okay, you know what the Zimmerman letter is, right?
Please share it with our listeners. Yeah.
Well, it was a letter that some some guy from the German Ministry of, I don't know if the Defense Ministry or what, wrote to the Mexican consulate, to the Mexicans, and said that if you help us and support us, we'll give you we'll give you your Western states back that the United States took from you. And that's one of the main reasons we got in the role. Now, I'm not sure that was the false flag in that, but I'm saying when this clown, Dunker or Junker, whatever his name is, has the gall to say something like this, just let him remember. And again, I don't want to remind people. People, share this with your friends. Russia, again, is not our enemy. They are our friend. They are against this globalism. The enemy is the EU. The enemy is the globalists. The enemy is the enemy within the domestic enemy. It has nothing to do with Russia. And neither is Iran, by the way. Iran is not the kind of Islamists that want to spread their religion by force. They don't want to do anything by force. The problem there is the Saudis and the Saudi-backed weak or Wahhabi. And I don't know whether the Israelis are involved in this also. I'm not even sure.
Probably to some extent somewhere. Anyway, listen, Mark, I need to let you go because we got a bunch of calls waiting on the line. We're running out of time here. But, you know, you're absolutely right. Donald Trump's trying to be a businessman, and he needs to be a leader right now. And I'm in agreement with Alex Jones that NATO is doing a lot of this escalation in Europe. And I think one indicator of that is every time you see another story about more and more weapons going over to the Russian border, it's from some other EU country, not the United States. We're sending Polish F-16s to the border. We're sending from Romania and so forth and so on. Anyway, Mark, we're going to let you go, and we're going to switch to Brendan in San Francisco. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
That was a great call. I was going to bring up Alex Jones. I've been very critical of him, but today he had an excellent show. I recommend all 4 hours be watched by the viewers. Basically, it covered like the 4 stages of Islamic conquest, and there's plenty of information on the internet about it. It's called a hijra, and there are 4 stages, and once they get up to around 10% is when they start implementing all their nonsense, Sharia nonsense. I want to piggyback on the last call, though. There was a really interesting session in Congress where Panetta was being grilled about who authorized war acts, and basically he baited him into admitting that they don't rely on Congress to declare war anymore, and he was saying that NATO he was dancing around in circles, but basically he was saying they waited for NATO and a coalition to authorize war. And he goes, I can't believe what I'm hearing from you, Panetta, that we're not relying on Congress and that NATO is pulling the strings. So it really does demonstrate that we have lost control of our government, just to piggyback on the last call.
Well, more importantly, we've lost control of the war policy.
Right. Well, there you go. I mean, that is our government, and we've handed over our authority, and shame on Congress. But it looks like, to me, and this is kind of where I was calling for, was this whole immigration. And I just want to keep pushing on immigration, because once we lose this battle, it's over. I said yesterday we're getting attacked from left, right, and center, and I think this is where our focus should be. Trump is kind of letting this get away. We need to stop this now and point out our enemies, and Alex Jones did a pretty good job. He's not real critical of Israel, but I truly believe that Israel and Saudi Arabia and even the Catholic Church have colluded to destroy America, or the West. We'll call it the West, Europe included. And they're being quite successful, and they are accelerating their plans. Now, it's time to push back. And another product for the InfoWars store is tar and feather. We need to start tar and feathering these people. This woman that was leaking, she should be shunned. No soft landing for her. Kick her ass out on the street and tar and feather her. And next one up, you know.
Well, certainly getting rid of this girl is a good start. It's going to send a message to everybody else on the staff. You know, you remember who it is you're actually supposed to be working for. But again, hopefully Trump is starting to wake up and realize that he's not in a business, he's in politics, and it's a completely separate world with completely different rules. Anyway, listen, we're going to let you go. We're going to take one more phone call from David in Los Angeles, then we're going to close the lines and get back to doing some news. David, what's on your mind today?
Thank you, Michael. I've been listening to your show for a while, and it's my first time calling, and I enjoy listening to what you have to say. First thing first. My question is, regarding the two names that were released by the New York Times today regarding the sources. It's kind of frustrating to see that they have no shame in just releasing these names and going with their agenda. And then it's also kind of frustrating to see Trump not really being really hard on them, regarding the leaks that have been happening for a couple of past months. And my question to you is, where do you think this is going? Because as one previous caller mentioned, that there's a lot of deterioration going in the government, and so as a spectator, I'm just interested to know, what do you think this is going in the next couple of weeks?
Well, it's hard to say. At this point, as near as I can tell, the establishment propaganda, the corporate media, are rapidly losing what remains of their audience, and they're just getting more and more desperate and more hysterical. This article from the New York Times, which is trying to make newness going over to the White House to view classified information available only at the White House as some kind of collusion and obstruction to this hue and cry about Russia. I think people are turning off from that. We know the New York Times is in serious financial trouble. They've lost so many readers and so many advertisers. I think they're really starting to deconstruct themselves. And we're going to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the economic news. Now, yesterday we were talking about how Russia hosted a delegation from Iran in the Grand Kremlin Palace. And the choice of venue was not done lightly. It was sending a message to Iran: we value an alliance with you. And sending a message to the rest of the world: Iran and Russia are good friends, so you attack Iran at your own risk. Basically, Putin is taking the Kennedy doctrine and turning it back on ourselves. And to sort of cement that new reality, the governor of the Central Bank of Iran has just announced that Iran and Russia are going to use their own internal national currencies in all trade transactions. They're not going to go through the U.S. dollar, and I can imagine already over at the Federal Reserve they're screaming, invade, invade, nuke 'em, nuke 'em, all must pay homage to the Federal Reserve note. And that's really what all these wars are about. Trying to get the world back to Bretton Woods, and it's not going to happen. Now then, let's see. Under the guise of fuel economy, the environment, various other things, liberals are now launching a campaign to impose heavy taxes on older cars. And apparently they're very concerned over the fact that there are still cars out there that are already paid for, and worse, they are cars that the drivers can fix for themselves, because the new economy requires you always be in debt for your car, and you always go and spend money on a mechanic to get the car repaired. They're trying to basically bring back mandated planned obsolescence, and it's a warning sign, because back during the Depression in the 1930s, the U.S. government actually seriously considered passing a law imposing a lifespan on things you would buy, like washing machines and refrigerators. They would come stamped with a expiration date. And if you were caught using that appliance after that date, even if it was still in perfect working order, you would be punished and penalized. The goal was to force people to buy more products to try and recover the economy. And thankfully that bill failed. And it would have failed even if it had passed, because people will buy newer things if they have the money to do it with. When you have ruined an economy, you cannot fix it by simply going on out there and ordering people to buy things if they don't have the money with which to do it. That was why Obamacare failed miserably. Obama came on out and said, we're going to guarantee every American has health insurance. You will buy health insurance. Problem solved. Only it wasn't solved because people could not afford those high premiums. They can't order the American people to improve the U.S. economy if the U.S. economy does not improve for the American people. We'll be back after station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And let's talk about immigration, refugees, a lot of things going on. Apparently, U.S. District Court Judge Derek Watson is operating in a fantasy world of his own mind, where his authority exceeds that of the law, the Constitution, and the President of the United States of America. He has just declared his temporary halt of Donald Trump's travel ban permanent, or actually indefinite. It's there until a higher court overrules it. Now, obviously, this is now going to go on to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, who will no doubt uphold Judge Watson's tomfoolery, or in this case, Derek foolery. And from there, it'll go to the Supreme Court. And I got to tell you, U.S. District Court Judge Derek Watson makes me ashamed to live here in Hawaii, because this is where all this nonsense is coming from. And again, we are finding out more and more that the judges who are putting up roadblocks to the travel ban are not doing so out of the law and the Constitution. They're merely expressing their opinion. They don't agree with it and are using that as if it were a force of law. And it isn't. Judges' opinions are irrelevant. They're not allowed to write the law or rewrite the law from the bench. So, now then, as one of our callers mentioned, European Union President Jean-Claude Juncker has come out with one of the most absurd things he has ever said, saying that unless Donald Trump ends his support for Brexit, unless Donald Trump starts supporting the unity of the EU, that he, Jean-Claude Juncker, is going to start breaking up the United States of America just to show Trump what it feels like. And he's specifically saying that Juncker is going to promote the independence of Ohio and Texas. Well, Texas does want to break free. There's an independence movement down there. I don't know about Ohio. But there are a couple of differences here. When the United States was formed, it was a confederation of states of people who all spoke the same language, had the same culture and belief systems. That's not true for Europe. The EU was imposed from outside, trying to blend together all these people with different cultures and different languages. And it was sold to them purely as a free trade, free travel bloc, and then mutated into something far, far worse. So Juncker is out there saying that he is going to work for the independence of Ohio and Texas unless Donald Trump drops his support for the Brexit. Nigel Farage responded by calling Juncker a fool. And he's absolutely correct on that. Now, over at the EU, senior figures there are still trying to get back into Britain and say it's not too late. You can still change your mind and remain our slaves. Really, you know, it's much better being our slaves than not being our slaves, because we'll make it much worse for you not being our slaves. They're not going to quit. I'm sure in the back of their head they're figuring somehow in the next 2 years we will end this nationalist, populist nonsense that threatens our new world order. Now, Hungary has passed some new strict laws regarding immigration, regarding asylum seekers in particular, saying the asylum seekers must be kept in designated transit zones and camps while their applications are processed. In other words, they can't just come into Hungary and blend in with the general population while waiting for the paperwork to catch up with them, which can take years because there's so many of them. Now they have to remain in these designated transit zones. Needless to say, all of George Soros' non-governmental organizations are out there screaming, it's foul, it's racist, it's, how are you expecting us to blend the population together when you're trying to keep them apart? They're fighting an uphill battle because the leaders of 4 Central European countries are vowing that they are not going to go along with this open border relocation of Middle Eastern and African refugees, and they don't care how much they're fined by Brussels. Some of them are even saying they won't pay it even if they are fined. We're beginning to see the breakup of the European Union because Brussels has just grown way too big for its britches, and they've become abusive. It almost reminds me back in our own Declaration of Independence, where it says, experience has shown that people are disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable. But when a long chain of abuses and usurpations pursuing the same objective evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and provide new guards for their security. And that's what's happening in Europe. When Brussels abuses the predations of the European Central Bank were tolerable, people would just say, go along and say, okay, yeah, okay. But now we have European countries being driven into starvation by the predations of the private central bank, the ECB. We're seeing the nightmare of the refugee program, and Brussels crossed that line. The evils are no longer sufferable. And the Europeans are standing up and saying, enough. This isn't working. It's time for a change. Now, interestingly enough, we're going to do a quick shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Remember that attack in Berlin, this Anis Amri stole a truck and crashed it into a Christmas market, killed 12 people. It turns out there was a German state interior minister who blocked his deportation 9 months before the attack happened. And that is now coming on out despite the cover-up, and parliamentarians are saying that this guy needs to resign. He is clearly a security risk to the nation, as is anybody who works to bring in criminal immigrants to a population just because it serves the New World Order. The Scottish Parliament is now backing Nicola Sturgeon's demand for a new independence referendum, and I certainly hope that they have more safeguards against election fraud than they did the last time out, because the last time out they weren't even trying to hide the election fraud that was going on. So for the people of Scotland, you need to overhaul the election system and come up with something that you can have a high degree of confidence actually represents the will of the Scottish people. Because polls are showing the vast majority of the people of Scotland do not think that first independence referendum was conducted fairly and honestly. We were showing photos and videos of the fraud just taking place right out in the open. It's almost like the vote riggers didn't care. Yeah, we're stealing the election. What are you going to do about it? We know what William Wallace would do about it. Now, apparently down at San Diego, an attorney general from one of the Mexican states has been arrested for smuggling and distributing drugs over a period of years. These are charges filed by the state of New York earlier this month. Charges against Edgar Vetia, who is Nayarit's state prosecutor. and he's been arrested at the border. So the United States isn't the only nation whose government is itself steeped in drug money corruption. Now, here's something that's going to keep a lot of people up at night. There's this refugee who's been admitted to the United States of America. They took his fingerprints, and long after he has been released into the general population and nobody knows where he went, they found a match. The same fingerprints were all over this Iraq bunker that was used to hold hostages in terrible conditions. And this guy is now roaming the streets of America. Anyway. You know what this is? This is another breach of the contract. We obey the government, and in exchange, the government says they're going to protect us. Clearly, they have failed on that, haven't they? They have made us vulnerable to all these illegal immigrants and refugees who are criminals, rapists carrying contagious diseases. They have left all of our computer systems wide open to cybercrime. Where is the benefit to the American people from the American government? I actually don't see any. And that's why I keep saying we need a new cash for clunkers law, where we take our old, bloated, wasteful, inefficient government, we take it over to the trash yard, put it in the little machine and crunch it down to a steel coffee table, and then we all get a check for $50,000 with which to buy a new, smaller, more efficient government. That's what we need right now. Meanwhile, the U.S. is considering 100% tariffs on European Union goods. Trump is apparently ramping up a trade war, and Juncker's comments today are probably not going to make things any better. So far from unifying the world, unifying the supply chain, this push for a global government is actually starting to result in more blockage of international trade, which is exactly what they do not want. The agenda is seriously in trouble. Another article out of Investment Watch blog. What path will globalization take moving ahead into 2017? Are we going to witness the end of globalization? I think we're witnessing it right now. We're witnessing it right now. People do not want a global government. They can see how abusive and tyrannical national governments are. A global government would only be worse because there'd be no alternative. There'd be no restraint on them. At least in our present world, if you get sick and tired of the government where you are, you can move. And a lot of Americans are turning in their passports now and heading to other countries. Under a global government, that can't happen. You are stuck with whatever the ruling body wants to do to you. Thin out the population. We're running out of money for retirement. Let's start killing the old people. And there's nobody to stop them. Take the absolute worst myths about Hitler, Stalin, Pol Pot, blend them all together, and realize that if there is a global government, it is only a matter of time before such an individual seizes that golden throne of planet Earth. It will be inevitable. I think human civilization is best served by a planet Earth with 1,000 little tiny nations all over it, each taking care of their own needs internally, and there'll be a little cross-border trade, because people find a certain charm in having something from other countries, a lot of tourism, and no large empires trying to own it all. Now, there's a lesson from history, and it has to do with the fall of Rome, specifically the Western Empire. And Valens was considered the last real emperor of Western Rome, and he fell, or rather, he basically lost Rome at the Battle of Adrianople. And I may have mispronounced that. And it was when the Goths swept on down into Roman territory. And the reason they lost that battle, and the reason Rome fell, was they were mismanaging their migrant crisis, and it cost Rome its empire. Because long before the Goths actually declared war on Rome, Goths were coming into Rome looking for shelter. And Rome said, sure, come on in. And that began a chain of events that led to the collapse of one of the biggest political and military powers the world has ever known. And maybe that's the plan. Maybe that's what Soros has in mind. Flood the refugees and immigrants into a country, eventually it'll collapse and make way for the global government and the new world order. Alrighty, moving along here. We've been talking about the abuses of civil forfeiture. We're starting to actually get some numbers on that. In the last 10 years, the Drug Enforcement Agency has seized $4 billion, with a B, from the American people. Most were never even charged with a crime. They're just grabbing cash for the sake of grabbing cash. And I remember when this whole civil forfeiture thing first started up, all the way back in the 1990s. And there were some courageous newspapers, like the Philadelphia Inquirer, who stood up and said, this is bad. This is going to be abused. Civil forfeiture was originally when we find a drug criminal that we know is guilty and he's been convicted in the court of law, we can seize his wealth and defund his future criminal enterprises. And almost immediately they stopped going after these big drug lords who've got teams of lawyers to protect them, and they started stopping people at airports and seizing cash. You got too much cash? Well, it could be used for drug dealing. No, that's not what I was going to do. Well, we have to err on the side of caution. You may be about to do something really nefarious. That's really way too much money for you to be carrying. You should be using your plastic. $4 billion seized by the DEA. And that's just the DEA. That's not Customs. That's not ICE. That's not your local police department. The number is much, much worse. We're living under a government that is pillaging its own people to survive. And there is no difference between what the DEA is doing and what Sir Guy of Gisborne's soldiers were doing as they scampered across Nottingham just grabbing chickens and pigs and farmers' daughters whenever they felt like it. It's exactly that same mindset. Oh, there's something over there I want to have. I will just take it. The law says I can. His Lordship has blessed me with a charter saying I can take things from you, even though you have done nothing wrong. It's a return to Code Napoleon. We think you're guilty. Unless you can prove you're innocent, we are going to treat you as if you are guilty. And that's not what America's about. America is you are presumed innocent until the prosecutors provide proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, I'm happy to say that a lot of state governments are starting to pass laws pulling back on civil forfeiture, saying the police cannot take your property until they have convicted you of a crime. And that is an important first step. Now, out there in the arena of political correctness, there's this weird video, and we posted it to the front of whatreallyhappened.com, where the new feminist agenda is that men have no rights, no causes, no reasons. They should just do what we tell them to do. And this is the legacy of the late 1990s militant feminism. Now, the original feminist movement was about things we could all get on board with. Equal pay for equal work, equal access to education, equal access to credit. It all made sense to us. We could support that. And then all of a sudden, in the 1990s, feminism got hijacked. And it was all this, all men are rapists, and there should be male-only curfews. And it wasn't an attempt to bring equality and balance to the society, but to reverse it completely. And they're still pushing that. This idea that, men are just, dribbling genitals, and that's all they are. And the political correctness has just gone totally wacko. Apparently, according to Time magazine, there's a new book coming out just in time for the holiday season. It's called Santa's Husband. And the book portrays Santa as a gay man in an interracial relationship. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. And I'm sorry, I'm one of those guys who grew up with this image of a Mrs. Claus. But I mean, it really is getting ridiculous here. Apparently a school in North Hollywood is getting its budget cut because they have too many white students. We'll be right back. And aloha America, welcome back to the show. And we are just about 3.5 minutes away from the launch of SpaceX's latest flight, SES-10. And this one is significant because, as you know, SpaceX's model is a reusable launch vehicle that flies up into space, then comes on down and lands under rocket power. And they've been having some problems getting it to work, but they got it to work. This is the first flight that will use a first stage that has been on a previous flight. And, of course, this is what is hopefully going to make SpaceX more cost-effective. So we're waiting to see that come on up right now. Let's finish up on the political correctness thing before we take another phone call here. It really is ridiculous out there with this constantly being offended about various things here. Michael Moore, of course, is out there saying that Donald Trump's ending of Obama's climate regulations is going to end all human life on the Earth. The elementary school in California banned the game of tag because it's too dangerous. And then there's that one we talked about this, where the high school in Iowa, students wearing red, white, and blue for a basketball game were denounced as racist. Oh, you're hurting the feelings of the refugees and the illegal immigrants here. And it just goes on and on. I love this one over at Carleton University. They removed the scales from the gym because they didn't want the overweight people to feel bad. It really is nonsense. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Bob in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Before I get to my question and comment, I just want to let you know your gift-wrapped copy of Santa's Husband is on the way.
Well, thank you very much. I will certainly be showing it and sharing it with our people here. And you know, it is ridiculous. And I understand everybody likes to impose their own values on the traditional figures, but I think this really goes over the top. And if this book has any sales at all, it's probably going to be more as a joke than anything else.
It might sell more books than It Takes a Village. Who knows?
That's true. Well, anybody could sell more books than It Takes a Village.
I was actually joking, but I am sending you a gift box with a couple books. Mike, your point about Syria and Crimea and the utter hypocrisy of the U.S. government, boy, I love that comparison you made. I mean, it's true. I mean, what's happening there, and you know what Michael Moore said about ending human life on Earth due to the pullback on the climate policies. He might be right, but not due to climate change, but due to nuclear war. If Trump doesn't pull back from Syria and Ukraine, these insane policies, we might see an end to human life if this continues.
Well, we have Fukushima, now we've got Turkey Point, the residue from 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl. You know, we may already be doomed. So if the radiation is going to kill us anyway, then, hey, let's put out more carbon dioxide. It's not going to make a difference in the long run.
Yeah. You know, Mike, I was thinking about something, you know, how JFK, who I believe was the first president born in the 20th century. Bill Clinton was the first president who was born in the baby boomer generation. I'm wondering, when are we going to see our first president who swears by the independent media?
Well, Trump is a big supporter of the independent media. He knows that the independent media backstopped him against the propaganda from the corporate media. And Trump and Spicer have not hesitated to express their disdain for the corporate media and its inaccuracies. I would like it if, well, Trump's very, very busy, but somebody from Trump's administration became a spokesperson, an outreach person to the independent media and come on our shows and help us build our audiences. To sort of, not necessarily to support Trump, although obviously it's going to help, but to try and encourage our corporate media to go back to actually reporting honest news to the American people. Because if they don't do it, if they don't start telling the truth, they're going to go out of business because the people who fund them now, these billionaires who are writing all these checks to support them, they're going to stop signing the checks when it becomes very obvious the corporate media is no longer able to control the minds of America. Anyway, Bob,
okay, thank you, Mike.
We're going to let you go. Take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. I was watching the live feed from the SpaceX.com website. The launch went off just fine. The first stage, the reused portion, which was the major point of this, worked just fine. It's already separated. The second stage is continuing on into orbit. The first stage is beginning its trip back down to Earth, and if it lands successfully, that's got to be a great moment. And my hat is off to those SpaceX people. It's great that America's back in space any way that we can, because it is truly amazing. And, you know, it's so great to watch it while it's happening, because they got the cameras all over the rockets and everything. When I was a kid, that never happened. I remember sitting there in school, we're getting ready for Alan Shepard's suborbital flight, which, of course, just went on and on and on and on. And then finally they launch, and we see the rocket go up, and that was the end of it. We just had to wait until they say, yeah, he's done. Today we got all the video coverage. It's rather amazing stuff. All right. Pardon my enthusiasm. I am a space nut. What can I tell you? All righty. There has been another mass shooting over the weekend, and to nobody's surprise, it took place in a gun-free zone. Isn't it amazing? Those signs don't actually work. You know what I think it is? These mass shooters have their brains so badly melted on prescription antidepressants, they have forgotten how to read. They can't read those signs. So maybe what we need is a sign with a gun that's got that red circle and the slash through it. Think that might work any better? No? I have another idea. Instead of a sign that says gun-free zone, we have a sign that says warning to all rapists, burglars, and nutcases. 10% of the people in this venue are carrying concealed. You guess which ones. And I'll bet you a lot of this mass shooting problem would go away. Because by and large, these mass shooters do what they do in the full expectation that they're going to walk away from it. And they don't. Another one of these gun grabber stories. Apparently a 5-year-old girl has been suspended from kindergarten because she played with a stick that looked like a gun. And she didn't bring it to school. It was a stick in the schoolyard that apparently had the right angle where it looked like a gun, and she picked it up and was holding it like it was a gun. Instant suspension. It really is absurd. And again, I am thinking back to when I was a kid, growing on up, where guns weren't mysterious, magical objects, they were tools. On your 12th birthday, you got your first gun, and you got the lecture on gun safety. Actually, you got the lecture on gun safety growing up. You know, because you'd stand there looking at the guns in the gun case, and you'd ask questions, and they'd answer questions. They would always hit the point. This is not a toy. This is a tool. It's a very dangerous one. When you are 12, you will get your gun. And they would teach us gun safety. And the first time you misused that weapon, you would get a trip to the woodshed, would have you eating dinner standing up for at least a week. And we didn't have mass shootings. We didn't have this kind of craziness going on. We would take our guns to school. We'd put them in the cloakroom. No big deal. Because on the way home, it's farming country, the kids would stop off and chase the critters out of the farm fields. That was a normal part of life, and there were no mass shootings. There wasn't an epidemic of crime. It was a very quiet and very, very peaceful lifestyle. The only bad incident we had with a gun the entire time I was living in that town in New Hampshire was an attempted suicide. That was it. We didn't have the out-of-control craziness we have now that's the product of the gun-grabber culture that wants to traumatize anybody who sees a gun. Now, there's something very weird going on over in Lake County where they're getting ready to have this lawsuit brought by Lenny Posner against Wolfgang Halbig. Now, Wolfgang Halbig, as you know, is a professional school safety inspector who has raised some very serious questions about what happened at Sandy Hook. And in an attempt to silence him, Lenny Posner is suing him to make him shut up, saying, you are defaming the families, you are wounding us, you're continuing the pain with all these questions, we have accepted the official story, we're ready to move on, why can't you? And oddly enough, Lenny Posner spent 15 minutes trying to get the judge to have the press removed from the pre-trial hearing. They haven't even started the actual lawsuit. And Posner is out there saying, no, we don't want any press. We don't want to have any video. We don't want to have any recordings. Got to keep this secret. Because he's afraid of what Halbig is going to bring on out in his defense. Because Halbig has a very, very solid case that we were lied to about Sandy Hook, just as we were lied to about the Boston bombing, just as we were lied to about 9/11, just as we were lied to about Saddam's nuclear weapons and Assad's sarin gas and torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, Lusitania smuggling weapons. Now, there's a video on the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com of Democratic Representative Michael Capuano. And he was standing up in opposition to this bill that Congress just passed to make it legal for your internet service provider to scarf up all of your browsing history and sell it to whoever might want it. Marketing companies, certainly. Blackmailers, maybe. There's no control. There's no restriction. And Capuano got up there and he made a very common sense argument about why internet privacy ought to be respected. And he starts out by saying, I bought underwear on the internet last week. I don't want anybody knowing what size underwear or color I'm wearing, but they're going to sell it to the marketers, and the marketers are going to hit me with more ads for underwear. Does that make sense? No, I just bought the underwear. I don't need to look at ads for more of it. And he makes a very, very good case, but unfortunately, Congress has sold out your privacy rights. I love that call that we got yesterday that had the perfect answer for anybody saying, well, if you've got privacy, you must have something you want to hide. If you're not doing anything wrong, you shouldn't worry about privacy. Yeah, why do you have curtains on the windows of your home? Why do you close the bathroom door? Why do you have an opaque shower curtain in the shower? Isn't that for your privacy? Yeah. They'll come back and say, well, they're not intruding there. Yeah, they are. Remember that big stink where this school district issued laptop computers to their students that had built-in webcams, and then were using these laptops. School administrators were using these student laptops to spy on the students in their own rooms, in their own homes. Yeah, that's why we need privacy. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Cerise in Jacksonville, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm fine.
Hello?
Yes, I'm fine. I hear you.
Okay, I apologize. I just got off work. I haven't been able to hear your show yet today, so you might have addressed this. Did you see about Representative Massey indicating he wants to audit the Fed and trying to garner support to audit the Fed?
Yeah, we did, and we talked about how Rand Paul's bill, which is basically his father's bill, is out of the House committee. It passed the committee, and it's headed for the floor. So there's going to be a big floor fight trying to get support for the bill. And unfortunately, given the amount of corruption in Congress and the Fed's willingness to just create money out of thin air and pour it all over congressional campaigns, I would love to see this passed. I'll be very surprised if it passes.
Okay, this gets to really why I'm calling, which is I'm a busy person, you're a busy person. It's been covered on your show before that we don't really have the time to go march in the streets, but to me this is so important. There is an organized march or rally. I'm willing to take off work and go to that city, wherever it might be, to show numbers and to show support. To me, none of our pet issues will ever really get resolved until we stop being slaves to the money supply. So I know people call and they ask you and they throw things in your lap and say, hey, will you coordinate it? But I know this is important to you.
It is important.
I know people listening. Okay.
It is important to me. Unfortunately, from out here in Oahu, I'm constrained about what I'm able to do. I can't fly to the mainland and march in the streets of America because of the intense cost. In fact, Claire and I are trying to get the money to move back to the mainland this year so that I can take part in some of these things I'm invited to take part in. But I'm sure there are other organizations out there who are aware of the predations of the private central bank. And I would be very surprised if there weren't already plans to have massive demonstrations in front of the Congress and all of the main Federal Reserve banks saying it's time for the American people to know just how much real wealth has been sucked out of the pockets of the people whose labor creates that wealth and poured into the pockets of the bankers who have invested little more than ink, paper, and some computers in the scam.
Okay, so I'd like to say to your listeners, if anybody is aware of organizing events to show that this is something the American people care about, if people can call in just to make us all aware so we can show up to the same event and have our numbers really count.
All right, well, we'll put the word out here, and I'll do a web search and see if I can find anything that's being planned and post it to whatreallyhappened.com, okay?
Do you have time for one other thing?
Real quick, we're running out of time on the show.
Did you ever see this tiny little headline piece that talked about Trump and his wife don't sleep together?
I don't even pay attention to that kind of stuff. I mean, obviously they don't sleep together now. He's in Washington, D.C., and she's in New York.
The point of it was that even when they're together, they don't sleep together, which again is a violation of privacy. But it struck me as they are really playing so hard with this man that they're definitely spying on him, and it's getting leaked because, of course, they didn't say who the source was, but they said sources claimed. They don't. It's just so personal and so dirty how they're.
Well, it is, and they're trying to imply that there's something going on there. But, you know, growing up, I've known a lot of very happily married couples who prefer separate bedrooms because one of them snores incredibly loudly. And, you know, Claire and I are the other way. In fact, if I can't feel Claire next to me in the bed, I don't sleep very well at all. And when I'm having to travel away from her, I get real cranky real quick. But there are some couples who have separate bedrooms because of the snoring issue or because somebody has restless leg syndrome or just tossing and turning or maybe keeping odd hours. And they don't want to...
We've observed how Trump is sensitive about these types of things, and I feel like they're pushing him so hard. He can be really prideful about these types of issues.
Well, I think, you know, again, it's going to be hard to sell this idea that he has a right to privacy when Congress has just taken away ours. And that's a real problem. Anyway, listen, got to let you go.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
All right, we're going to switch over to Nick in Southern California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I was calling about that internet privacy that you just brought up 5 minutes ago.
Yes.
And my question was, is there a way around that using proxy?
Well, no. See, the problem is this privacy intrusion is at the ISP level, which is the first thing that you're going to when you go out of your computer. The first thing you go is to your ISP. And you can go from the ISP to a proxy server, but by then the ISP has already got your browsing data.
Okay, well, shoot, if you can think of a way around that just pretty much circumvents the you know, the current way of doing things, I'd appreciate that. And then I sent you an email yesterday purely for humor with the Monty Python Money song. I don't know if you saw that or not.
I missed it. I'll look for it, though. I mean, I was a huge Monty Python fan, so...
Yeah, I sent it in the afternoon, and you know, it's got a big caption, humor, Monty Python, and I got a chuckle out of it. I thought you would like it.
Well, I will look for it, and if appropriate, I will put it up there because I am a Monty Python fan, and it is rather scary how so much of what they had done back then was prescient and is actually manifesting today. But I'll take a look for that. Anyway, Nick, we're going to let you go. We're going to take one more phone call from Tom in Indiana. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha.
Aloha.
Nice to talk to you, man. I sent you some stamps. Anyway, what I wanted to tell you is I got some cop friends, and one of them knew a cop that lived in the next town from Sandy Hook. And when there was a call-out, he went to render assistance. He was stopped by the state police, and that state isn't that big where he didn't know every one of the state police cops. And at Sandy Hook, there wasn't a single state police cop that he knew.
Yes.
None of them. And he tried to render assistance. They told him to go away. We don't need you. And anyway, he caused a... Well, anyway, he went back to his own home district then and told them about it. And they fired the guy, and he couldn't get a job in the surrounding 3 states. I just wanted to tell you that.
Yeah, that's how it works.
I watched everything on Sandy Hook, and I think that's definitely a conspiracy against us.
I agree.
But thank you very much, and aloha.
Aloha, thank you very much. Yeah, we live in an age of lies. That's how our government controls us. Hoaxes, frauds, deceptions, lies. That's how they do it. The story of this officer reminds me of the gentleman who married Claire and I. Just happened to be near Oklahoma City when that all happened. And drove on over, wanted to volunteer to help look for bodies. He had to show his ID 3 separate times. There were 3 cordons around the remains of the Murrah building, and he had to show his ID 3 times, and it was like, you know, an hour trying to get to the site. And, of course, all this time people are bleeding to death and dying under the rubble. And it was just so tightly controlled. And that right there tells you something wanky is going on. All right, we're going to close the phone lines for the rest of the show here and get back to the news here. If you have been seeing on social media all these stories claiming that Donald Trump has an incestuous relationship with Ivanka, it turns out they're all coming from the same source. There's a botnet that is just pouring these onto social media to try and get this piece of propaganda out there. Boy, the other side loves to play dirty, and the sooner Donald Trump realizes that, I think the better his administration is going to be. Going to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. I was just checking in with the SpaceX website, and it looks like the communication satellite is on its way to geosynchronous orbit. So that part is doing really well. I haven't been able to find out if that first stage did successfully soft land or not, but at this point it's certainly looking like SpaceX knows what they're doing. And I imagine it's very exciting over there, a lot of fun. Now, let's talk about fake science, not the real science like SpaceX is doing, the fake science. Very interesting article came out of Natural News. And it's talking about a big whoopsie over at Science Daily because it has 2 headlines, 2 stories based on the same exact science study that was published in the Journal of American Medical Association regarding vitamin D and cancer. And in one of these Science Daily stories citing this AMA article, it says vitamin D decreases risk of cancer, while the other story, citing the exact same study, says vitamin D and calcium don't reduce the cancer risk. All being driven by the money. We've got to keep the cancer establishment profitable. We can't have people preventing cancer. How will I afford my Porsche? Now, a very tragic story here. Young girl named Mia Blesky, very talented musician, dreamed of being a pop singer, was well on her way, was already doing TV and singing, and then she got the HPV vaccine, started getting sick and weakening, had an obvious adverse reaction that has now paralyzed her from the neck down, and it looks to be permanent. The doctors are claiming it's all in her head. She's making it up. We would never do anything wrong. Another article, LouRockwell.com, Vaccination Rethink. And it's harking back to a tragedy that happened in 1993, where 93,000 elderly Americans were vaccinated with a contaminated flu vaccine, and it killed them. And it was such a huge vaccine-related death, it actually caused the life expectancy of Americans to drop for the first time in 8 decades. And this was all covered up by health authorities and the news media. And Lou Rockwell is saying, if you can hide 93,000 vaccine-related deaths from the American people, what else is the vaccine industry hiding? It's time we find out. Meanwhile, out in California, they've passed SB 18, which allows state authorities to enter unvaccinated children's homes in order to assess the child's safety. Oh, you're obviously unsafe. You need a needle. Talk about dictatorship. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. We're standing by for John Stedmiller's show. I'm going to be taking the mic for just a few minutes while John gets in. So we'll be right back after station identification.